This is the close of our 15th season in Oklahoma City, and it's kind of been a remarkable 15 years. I do want to make sure that I thank a few people before we get started with the rest of the conversation today. First, the players and coaches, past and present, staff, past and present, everybody. We're really, really grateful for them. We wouldn't be in the position that we are in without the contributions of all those different people. And as I said before, we've packed a lot into 15 years, and we're looking forward to the next 15. But that is a result of all the different people that have touched the Thunder in some way, shape, or form. Obviously, our players are the most important people in the organization and also in the history of the organization. I also want to just specifically thank the fans that were at the airport the last couple times. We know that there's a lot of people that probably would like to be there because we have fans all over the world, and we have fans all over the state. But the effort and the commitment and the fandom that it takes to do something like that is not lost on anybody, and we'll never ever take that for granted. I really feel like those people are just representative of the kind of the diehards that exist, and I think it makes a big impression on the players because a lot of these guys have grown up watching the Thunder because, you know, like I said earlier, 15 years, there's no way to cut it. It's been a little while. And I feel like that was probably this iteration's first exposure to what it's like to be a Thunder player, what that entails. I also want to thank everybody that, fan-wise, that stood and claps for those Thunder legacy guys. As I said before, the most important people in the history of the Thunder are our players. And so just the recognition that all of these guys have passed through the doors is super valuable. And I feel like those are the true blue people that really, they love the Thunder in all of its warts. You know, doesn't matter if you wore the jersey, we're with you. I think in a small city like this, that really makes a difference. And so I want to point that out. And then to the fans that stood this season as a result of maybe a Kenrich Williams deflection or a J. Will charge or a Lou Dort dive on the floor or Isaiah Joe 3 that sent the sent the other team to a timeout and they felt compelled to stand and clap. We're super grateful for that. We want to have and build a home court advantage that is going to help us win a lot of games. And those people that are doing those things on the smallest levels really add up and help make the experience for our players unique. So we want to just make sure that we acknowledge those people. I also want to thank the media, everybody that's in the room, everybody that covers the team. You guys are an important part to telling the story of the team and serve a great purpose for the organization, even if we don't always agree with everything that you say or do. But it's a critical function to what it is that goes on with us as a part of the community. So just jumping into the season in review. Last fall, I guess September, the last time that we were here, I talked a little bit about the bandwidth that I thought the team could potentially capture. I talked about the fact that there's probably a high end and then there's an equally low end as a result of the fact that the team is young and the team has, or had relative inexperience, still has relative inexperience. But, and I laid out the fact that there's certain things that tend to work against young teams in the NBA. I see some head nodding, so you must have been awake for that part. But things that get in the way of young teams are pretty consistent, and they're not always talent-based. But I thought our guys did an excellent job with some of these things. The first thing was, a lot of times the headwind is personal ambition, statistics, awards, things of that nature. Another thing would be just a hard time internally communicating person to person. That's kind of hard when you're 19, 20, 21, 22 years old. There are people that are 50 years old that have a hard time communicating. So it's hard for young people in this type of environment to do that. I thought our guys did a good job with that. There's so many outside voices in the NBA, call them the silent forces of the NBA, that may have the best interest of the players in mind, but maybe not the best interest of the team. And so the ability to manage those relationships and see those things for what they were and not allow that to affect what we're trying to get done as a collection of people. I thought our guys did a good job with that. Understanding that the season is full of lulls and fits and starts, and seeing the season as a process and not necessarily evaluating every game or every week, because that's just the sign of the reeking of inexperience. The guys, I think, understood that you got to evaluate it kind of month to month to really understand where you're at. They did a great job with that. And I mentioned physicality a few times last time as well. I thought we made strides in that area. I'll talk about this a little bit later as well. We have more to do there, but I think we did. I think we made strides in that area as well. So I thought the guys did a good job with the priorities, and I think that's in addition to just like internal development and player development, part of the reason why we were able to achieve what we achieved this year in terms of progress. I also talked at the beginning of the preseason about the fact that our rate of learning would have to outpace our aging experience. It was another thing. I don't see as many nods here, so obviously at that point I lost you. But the point there is, when you have a young team, part of the way you make up for some of the gaps that you're going to have is how quickly do you adapt, how quickly do you learn. That's a really important part of development, team development as well as personal development. And I thought our guys learned along the way and could apply that stuff pretty quickly. And I was really impressed with that. Those are pretty good traits. Now, all these things I just mentioned, they're going to be on the docket for us to continue to manage and corral for quite a long time, until they become habitual. But this was a good starting point for us, and I thought the guys continued to learn. And part of it's because of the situations that they were put in. I also think that Mark did a great job of not blasting through adversities, but taking time to explain and unpack why they may be happening and how they can be utilized down the road for improvement. Again, part of seeing the season in segments and not just in these bite-sized hot take moments. I think that was really important. I talk all the time with the staff and have for years about this theory of, in order to, it's kind of like natural selection for the NBA, but in order to make it, first you have to have instincts as a player and as a team. And that's kind of keeps you surviving. If you have reasonable instincts, that affords you experiences. If you are a good learner, you can accumulate the experiences, good and bad, learn from them, and then eventually over time, you can funnel those into wisdom. And if you collect enough of that wisdom, eventually that leads to poise during uncertainty. And we're seriously still in the experience gathering phase, but I do think we're learning from those effectively, and hopefully down the line in the future we'll be able to look back and say, well, we have some wisdom as a result of this. We've seen this situation before. We've been in this dynamic before. There's no way for us to speed that up. There's no way for us to slow that down. That's going to present itself as it should, however it may be. More on this season, I thought the play style continued to grow and evolve. I do think that a lot of the progress that we saw this season in that respect is all linked back to what we were able to get accomplished in the 2020-21 season. And I do think it's important to point out that season, the 2020, we got so much accomplished in that year. And I think probably for people that don't do this for a living, they may not understand or see that. But many of the things that people were praising this year had nothing to do with this year. They were things that were being discussed, molded, sculpted, pressed in that period of time that allowed us to execute or implement some things now. And so I don't think that should be forgotten. And there'll be things hopefully that we accomplish this year that may be invisible now that could show up at a later date. And that's why we talk about things being in sequence, things compounding, and taking a long lens on the development of the team and the players. Our shooting took a big jump. We were last in the league in three-point shooting last year. I think we're middle of the pack now. I don't know the decimal points and how close we are to maybe either side of that, but we're somewhere in the middle. Our bench shooting obviously took a big jump as a result of Isaiah, and that's great. But I think the real question is why is that the case? And the big part of that is the shots that we're getting and the way they're generated. And then when we're playing really well, it allows us to make more shots. So you can look at a shot chart and they can be coming from the right places, but that's kind of a very shallow way to look at that, because it's how are they being delivered, what is the timing of that, what's happened in the possession before that. It's not just launching them from where they are, it's what's leading up to that. And I thought our lead up to our and the shots we were generating were much improved in terms of just the rhythm in which we were playing, and that helped. Physically, we talked about this. A lot of people think about physicality and they think about one side of the ball, they think about defense. Offensively, I think there's room for us to get more physical. You can see that at the free throw line. We were last in the league of getting into the bonus before our opponent. That's not a place you want to be. We spent about a minute per game where the other team was in the bonus and we were not. 4 minutes per game, a minute per period. So 4 minutes a game where we get fouled, we don't shoot, they get fouled, they shoot. And I think everybody knows that, we play downhill. We're I said this to someone the other day, we're downhill like a Warren Miller movie, for those of you old enough to know what that is. And we got to get something for that. And big part of that is physicality with the ball. I think Josh specifically, because he's as big as he is, sometimes he's got to figure out a way to turn those fouls into calls, and we got to do a better job with that. And then defensively, we have to. We're always going to need more nasty. There's no question about that. And so we have to be able to dial that up when needed, but also play in control. But physicality and then nasty, we have to have that if we're going to play in big games and succeed. Our net rating went from, I think it improved 9 points or something like that. Probably won't see that again. And a big part of that is because of where it was, quite frankly. But it was a significant jump. Again, I'm less concerned with what happens. I'm very, very concerned with how it happens. And the jump on that is pretty simple. We were able to get those numbers going in the right direction because of internal growth and development of our players. And the fact that we had some guys that had been steadily improving over years, and then a few guys that steadily improved over games, is what gave us the jump that we got. And if you really think about the teams that we've had here, the through line for a lot of the jumps in net rating, or even the sustaining of net rating, has been through the internal development that we've had, player development wise, over the last 15 years. And this kind of played out similarly. I do think with respect to that, again, going back to the rate of learning, the guys were not put in comfortable positions over the last few years, and there was a lot of concern about that. And I mentioned in these conferences that we can't bubble wrap everybody. Like, they're going to have to face steep circumstances. They're going to have to compete, and they're going to have to learn that you get your ass kicked sometimes. And if you don't, if you do, how do you respond to that? And I thought we had some good response. I thought that, again, we didn't make it easy on the guys, whether it was, we traded for Kemba Walker. We did not bring Kemba Walker in. We kind of, even though I think it would, yes, he could have helped us in some ways, but we needed that experience for the guys that we were moving forward with. And the fruits of those situations and circumstances that they were placed in, I think we saw that this year, specifically with Shea, but also with other players as well. And when you're put in those adverse situations, you compensate, and you learn, and you figure out how to do it as a team. So I think that was really important for us. Turning to next season, this will be our third draft in this kind of sequence that we're in as a team. So we're excited about that. At the same time, you've heard me say this for 15 years. Every season, you go back to square one. I think you probably heard that from the guys too. You go back to square one. Whether we won 60 games, Western Conference Finals, or we won 20 games, we have to start over. And that's what teams are, and that's how you build these types of endurable habits that we want to have. You don't carry that with you. So it does get harder for us. There's no question about it. And the only way to solve that problem is to go back to square one and start figuring out how to be the best team we can by the end of 82 games and flush whatever happened, previous. I think the guys, again, on the learning component, I think they learned how long the season is. Not just physically, mentally, and emotionally, no question about that. Again, conscious discomfort, you have to go through these things, you have to experience them. You can't just tell people about that. They have to go through that, and they have to build the endurance to deal with it. I think they also learned that the sky falls on every NBA team at least 2 times a year. So over 82 games, you will not play well for 82 games. You may play horrible for weeks, and maybe a month. You don't want to have several months, but every team, the teams that are still playing right now, the sky fell on this season, and everybody freaked out. And the teams that have sophisticated competitiveness to them understand that while you're going through that, that's the solution. The regression is, okay, you have to keep pounding through this and working through it. And I think if you have the right principles, the right mentality, and the right temperament, you can work through that and become a better player and a better team as a result of that. And I think our guys figured that out. So there's going to be lulls. Can you play through the lulls? Can you block out the noise? Can you not become part of the audience? Can you still maintain the perspective of the competitor and not the observer? Because that's your only solution, is to work through it. I think we did that several times this year, quite frankly. I was very impressed with that, both the players and the coaches. One specific example was actually early in the year. We had a trip. We went to Milwaukee and Detroit. We had started the season almost, I think, the play style was very idealistic. We were in a good spot there. Irrespective of the outcomes, you could tell that we were progressing. We got off track on that trip for whatever reason, and we were able to snap back quickly after that. I think we had maybe one off day of practice, so I don't even know if we had a practice, but we played, the next game was against Milwaukee. We went double overtime with them and ended up losing the game, but we were back to the brand of basketball. Even if it wasn't being executed perfectly, the intentions were back to where we need them to be, and we did that really quick. And for a young team, in my experience, that could take weeks. It took a couple days, and I think that was very promising, because it shows, the guys intellectually are getting that, and then also there's an intention and a want to do it the right way. But it's hard, because in order to do that, you have to override all these other ways you've been thinking or doing things for a long time. It's not just make a choice. It's you have to make that choice and override the other habit you might have had previously. So I thought it was really impressive. Play style wise, like I said before, we figured it out through the season when and we're going to have to do that every season because the team is going to change as a result of the players improving and getting better. So we're in, I always say observation mode, but we have to continue to observe and see how the team is continually kind of improving and changing. We're at our best when everyone knows, when whoever's on the floor knows their function, isn't trying to redefine their function, and isn't trying to expand their function. When that's happening, we have a chance to play at a really, really high level. That's hard to do. I thought our guys did a really good job with it because the goal isn't to have great individual performances. The goal is to have everybody playing well together in one totality. If we can do that, that's hard to do, but to me, we figured out ways through the year to do that. I'll give you one example. When J-Dub started to emerge and improve at a pretty significant rate, the team had to absorb his improvement in a way that didn't compress or stifle other people, right? So how do you play well together? Not just can you get great individual performances. That's where I'd like the team to ultimately get to, and to be able to correct those things and figure those things out in time, and I think we're on our way to doing that. I also thought that we didn't let, beginning of the season, obviously Chet had an injury, there was impending doom on the team, and it was the end of the world. We never really responded to that as a team. I think the guys did a good job not allowing themselves to be channeled or changed by arbitrary expectations. I thought the coaches did a good job of that. Probably the most important aspect of that, in my opinion, is that we maintain like a beginner's mindset. We were open. Usually when you have something like that, that's these expectations that are arbitrary and just kind of thrown out there with no real purpose other than someone's got to say something. You can allow that to affect your work, your craft. And I thought we did a good job of shutting that out and taking a beginner's mindset of, okay, without judgment, what can we do and what should we try here? Because we need to learn as much as we can. And when you're thinking about trying to meet arbitrary expectations, you will shortcut things. You will make poor decisions, and you won't be as instinctive because, they talk about beginner's mindset or childlike mindset. You're just doing things and trying things and figuring them out and learning. And when you have a young team, it's like a young person. You can learn real fast. My kids, I can't believe how quickly they learn because there's nothing else interrupting them. They're not thinking about, does anyone think I look, foolish doing this? Like, what if the food's all over my face? They just eat the food. They figure out what they like, what works, what doesn't work. And I think that's important in sports. I think that's important in life. And I thought the team did a good job of maintaining an open mind to the different things that we needed to do. I'll give you one example. If you look at the box score from the first Minnesota game where we started the season, and the last one, there's a lot of differences. In the first one, Isaiah Joe played 11 seconds. Jay Will did not play. Jalen Williams played very briefly, but that part of that was because he got injured. But also, he wasn't playing 30 minutes or something like that. He probably would have played 15 minutes. Jalen Williams didn't start. The team from that point to the end of the season was a completely different team. If we were trying to race against arbitrary timing or arbitrary expectations that are set for us, we wouldn't have gotten to those things. And so a lot of credit to the coaches and the players for seeing the season as a real marathon and maintaining a real open perspective. And so the development of the team happens in that environment, and I have to continue to try to create that environment. One of the things I say to the coaches, and I've said since I've done this job, is do not fear the outcomes. The outcomes will come downstream from the decisions that we make. Let's make quality decisions. Let's ask the right questions. Let's define the problems and then move from there. The outcomes are only going to teach us those things. Unfortunately, as human beings, we react to them, and we have to be good about not doing that over the course of time. So looking forward, I said this in the fall as well, what we're looking for is consistent performance over a long period of time as a result of continuous improvement and progress. Some years are going to be better than others. I said this. I think I use craft work as the example. Craft work being like the thing that's just mechanical and just runs on its own time. I use some other drummers, I think, probably, because I use analogies and music's a big part of my life. But sometimes you're going to be ahead of the beat, and sometimes you're going to be behind the beat. And the key being that at the end, you just want to be better, than you were. There's going to be a point in time where we're behind the beat. This year we were Stuart Copeland. We were definitely ahead of it. Like there were some really positive things that were happening. But there's going to be a year where we may not be ahead. We might be behind a little bit. That's okay too. Like I said, resistance, regression, struggle, that's kind of how we've gotten to this point anyway, right? Even in the season, but also individually, the players. We need resistance and friction as human beings to be at our best. If not, unless you're superhuman, your standards will wilt a little bit. And so we're going to welcome that and figure out, how we define the problems that are creating that, and then we'll get a path to solve them. I think we're really well positioned to deal with whatever comes at us. And I also think this particular group of guys has a chance to win a lot of games together. I think that, and they took their first step on that by making those decisions on the priorities I talked about at the beginning. They can win a lot of games together if they choose to do that. Now, everyone's got to do their job, myself included, the coaches, but I really like the way the conversations are within the building and what they're about, and the openness in which we can discuss the things that could potentially get in the way of being the type of team we want to be. And I give them a ton of credit for their maturity, their intellectual maturity, and I think it shows through in the way they play too. But I think their intentions are in the right spot. I think they're driven, and I think they know that we have a ton of work in front of us, and they're not shying away from that. So just in closing, I talked about the mountain, the second mountain. We're staring that sucker down. We're seeing it, and we're trying to figure out how we're going to find a way to the top of that. I mentioned we have a ton of work to do. No one knows that more than us. We have a ton of humility about what we're trying to do and how challenging it is. We also have a ton of humility about how little we control a lot of this. There's a lot of randomness that goes into this industry, and I hope that's come through in my comments in the past. A lot of the positive things that happened this year, they were not like, no one's pressing, levers to make all that happen. There's a lot of randomness and good fortune that has to go into things, and then you have to remember that when you get some tough breaks. I do think it's important to note that the progress that we didn't make by watching the clock. We didn't make that progress by working off somebody else's, arbitrary idea as to when things should or should not be happening. In fact, if we were doing that, I don't think we'd have a 9-point swing in net rating. I don't think we'd be in a playoff, type environment at the end of the season. I don't think we'd be seeing the type of player development improvements that we've made. I think quite the opposite. So we're going to continue to let everybody else watch the clock and create the arbitrary expectations. Our focus is on setting the pace for ourselves, making the best decisions for the organization, no matter how unpopular they may be, taking the criticism for doing those things, and then following through with the mindset that we'll solve it. We'll figure it out together because we have the right people in the building to do that. And, if we have calm persistence and the discipline to resist the path of least resistance, I think we will continue to make progress over the course of time. And with that, I'll let you guys fire away.